So this is what we got to in the last video. We built the kind of building blocks of our scene. Very simple, low poly stuff. We did some lighting. And we're going to now build the game elements of our animation and give everything a bit of polish and a bit of spice and make it interesting. So this is what we're working towards, this recreation of the old Snake game. We've got kind of elements falling from the sky, we've got power-ups, Snake gets longer as he goes around the path, and it all finishes with like a nice little transition as a kind of game over state, so the animation can loop perfectly. There's nothing particularly complicated going on in here. You're going to see all sorts of interesting techniques to make this stuff. Once again, like I learned a lot putting it together, so hopefully you'll pick up some cool tricks along the way. But let's get into it. The first thing I want to do is, on the scene that we had previously, I don't love the lighting and the color palette. I was kind of putting in values as I went making the video. So we're going to do a bit of tidying up and a bit of housekeeping, and we're going to fix a couple of issues, and then we're going to get into building the new elements for our scene. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is this volume cube that I've got is really annoying because every time I try and click on anything, now we could just hide it in the scene, but what I'm actually going to do is click on this little funnel and turn on the restriction toggles up here, and then if I check this arrow, it's no longer selectable, so I can still see it in the scene, but it's not interfering with anything. I'm just going to make sure I've got the screencast keys on. Okay, it should be good to go. So, firstly, the background in this scene is too dark. So let's just tweak that. So we're using Easy HDRI. We can just bring this color up a little bit. And that's already warmed our scene up a lot. So it's looking much nicer. I would like this to be more powerful, I think. So we'll dial up to 1000 watts. And then we're just going to tweak the positioning a little bit. And we'll just pull it back. And rotate it so it's casting a bit of sheen on our tiles. Something like that. It's looking more interesting. So I'll go back to our camera view. And I think I'm just going to turn down. Now I've deselected it. So we're just going to turn it back on again so we can edit the volume cube. And I'll go to shading and let's just see what it's set to. Let's set this to 0.75. Maybe even a little bit higher so it's not quite so... There we go. Something like that. So we'll go back to our layout view. So we're looking better already. In my taste, this grass is too saturated. Okay, let's just turn off selecting that. This grass is too saturated. So let's go into our shader. And I kind of like these colors to be a bit more earthy and muted. So let's just try and bring these down a bit. And you'll remember from the last video, it's randomly picking from this color spectrum, so I need to change all my colors to something more to my liking. Maybe something like that. Could dial our saturation down a little bit. Kind of looking a little bit more natural. Let's do the same with these. They're just too saturated for my taste. So you might completely disagree with me. I encourage you to disagree with me. What do I know? I'm just a guy on the internet. But yeah, just play around with it until you're happy with how everything's looking. Okay, we're getting somewhere, I think. Let's have a look at these rock shaders because they're not working quite as I had in mind. So I'm going to change this to overlay. And I'm going to push this to the edge. And dial this down a bit. Okay. Okay, let's just have a look at this rock because it's not shading quite as I'd like. So just solo this so we can see everything properly. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this to overlay. And we're going to just control shift. You remember from before, if we control shift on this, you can see our node wrangler. So let's push this all the way to the edge. And I think what I want to do is dial up the samples and then really bring down the distance here. So let's try something like that, which looks kind of extreme. But if we then click back on our principled shader, you can see we're now getting that highlighted edge that I was trying to get before. And I think I'm just going to simplify the color palette here a little bit. Here we go, that's looking a bit more rock-like. Let's go back to our scene. And yeah, we've got a much more interesting set of detail going on. It's much nicer. It's just anything that needs... We're going to do the same trick here, I think. So, down to 50. Just have a look at our color ramp. And we're going to bring our distance down even more. And then back to our principal shader. It's subtle, but it just kind of brings in... And we can dial up our factor a bit, so we get a bit more shading. I think I want this to overlay, not multiply. Okay, that's way too strong now. Pull this to the edge, make it black. And we're going to just pull this in a bit. Okay, I think that's working better. That's a much more sandy colour. Okay, I'm kind of happy with that. Let's just check that all of our rocks are using the same texture. Just going to make this black as well. And let's just have a look at the sunlight. I think we can pick a better angle on this. And we'll also dial up our strength. So let's really blow this out a little bit. Let's like try 2. And that's looking nice. So, okay, I'm kind of happy with that. I could maybe reduce the saturation of my grass a bit more. This is the reality of working in Blender, that you're just always tweaking things till you get to somewhere that you want. Yeah, I like that more. But again, you might want like a really saturated grass. It's entirely up to you. Let's just bring our dirt saturation down as well, maybe darken it a bit. And just gonna have one more look at these rocks. Let's take that colour out, get more of a blue, and make this more of a grey. Cool. Okay, so I'm just going to save this version. I'm going to do an incremental save. And there's a couple of other things that I like. Yours might look a little bit different here, but we're just going to pull these rocks down into the scene a bit more. Maybe rotate this one a little bit. So it'll look a little bit odd like that. Yeah, this stuff doesn't really hugely matter, but it's good to tweak as you go. And the advantage of working in low poly is that you can fix things that you don't like. And maybe make this a little bit thicker, a little bit taller. Okay, I think it's time to stop messing about. So we need to do some boring tidying up here so that we can keep track of all our objects in the scene. So we'll go back to our layout view. If at any point your computer's running a bit slowly, switch to viewport shading, and you just need to turn off your volume cube there. So you've got options up here to speed things up if you need them. I think my computer can kind of handle it, so carry on in this view for now. So I'm just going to select, hopefully we've got everything in our floor tiles already set up, but let's not have them all named cube. So we're going to select everything at once, and then we're going to go to edit, batch rename. And then we're going to change this to set name. And we're going to type in a new name. and it will now give us all of our floor tiles with an individual name after it, which really helps. Grass tile we've already set up, so that's good. So if there's anything else that needs power up, we might be replacing, so we don't have to worry about those at the moment. Our rocks folder is empty because we've got rocks and props. Let's see what's going on down here. Let's just do any tidying up we can. So select all of these rocks. Edit, battery name, set that. So we should now have 15 rock. And this is a classic things that I say I would do, but would never actually do whilst making my own work. Okay, so we're going to rename these columns. A battery name is an absolute, it's so useful. Just call something like building top. Okay, so we're just going to select all of those, hit the N key, and then choose columns. And let's see if we can move this into our rocks and props. Collapse that. Select all of those, call it rocks. And I'm going to drag that into our rocks and props section. So we've got power ups, we've got grass tiles, we've got rocks and props, we've got our lights, we've got our camera empty, which I remember is controlling the pivot. We've got this folder called rocks, which has got. Okay, so I already had a rocks folder, so let's delete this one. And we can put this in. It's fun to say. We'll just name this rocks. Okay, I think we're good. Well, maybe we'll put the volume cube in the camera section. Maybe let's put it in the light section. Okay, so everything's neatly divided up. So let's just save again. So the first thing we want to build is, let's do these rocks and the plants and see if there's anything else interesting that we can make at this stage. So now I think rocks, plants, and then we're going to tackle building the snake. And I'm going to do this in a separate project for now so things don't get too complicated. So we're just going to save this out. Still don't like that blue. Let's take the blue from my new projects in. It's amazing what a difference getting the colour right. There we go. It's looking much nicer. Also, I notice I've got a broken texture here, so I'm just going to fix that. If you're finding that your textures are disappearing, a little fix for that is to go to external data and make sure you've got automatically pack resources. And for some reason, I'm getting an error when I do that. I'm just going to delete that texture. Okay, so deleting it, fix that problem. Hopefully you haven't got that problem, but useful to know why you can't. Actually, one other little thing that I want to fix now. If I go into solo mode and view that object, so that's the / key, you'll see that it's on the tile face, but it's actually stretched around everything else. And it's a very easy fix for that. But that's because I've projected from above and then it's stretching the UVs down the side. So all we need to do is select this top face that we want and then choose select invert. And if we go into our UV editing mode, you'll see we've got this extra bit of the image that we don't want. And if we just go into the shade mode, I've chosen the one tile that doesn't have a face on it. So we're going to select this face, and we're going to choose select invert. And then if I hit A whilst hovering on this side of the window, and then S to scale, and type in 0, and then we can just position it on the part of the image that doesn't really have anything going on. So it's 1 pixel in size now, all of these faces, and you'll see that it's removed that bumpy tunnel. It's just sitting on the top of our face. Now, you will also remember that we need to copy these UVs across. Unfortunately, we've got everything in a group, so we're going to right click and choose select objects, and then it will keep the last one that we selected highlighted. And then we can choose Control L and copy UV maps. And there, select any of these other ones. You'll see that the positioning is still correct. Right. Okay, one final save. And then we're going to start a new document. So we're going to start with a very easy element. And again, we get to use the default cube, which is always exciting. So I just want to change the scale of this because we know that all of our boxes are 1 meter by 1 meter. I'm going to use this to make the block that falls from the sky. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to tab into edit mode. And actually, before we do that, we're going to hit Control and A and apply the scale so that our bevels work properly. I'm just going to put a couple of loop cuts in. And then we're just going to pick up some of these edges, just very slightly move them about a little bit, so it's not perfect. And then we can start beveling some edges as well. So you remember this from before. I'm going to click on a vertex, and then if we pull it out, nothing happens to start with. If we change the vertices, we can then create these kind of like shrunk corners. We could select a couple of edges and try beveling that, see what we get. Maybe I'm just going to slide these along a little bit so it's a bit more natural looking. So we're just kind of creating some slightly distressed edges. Again, I don't really mind what it looks like. It's just to get something in place. Let's just pull this down a little bit. There you go. That's a nice sort of falling from the sky type rock. Next thing I want to do is add a bevel modifier. So I'm going to use bevel and just gives it that more interesting, softened, low poly look. So let's just turn that edge down a little bit, bump up our segments. Nice. We're just going to apply that. Okay, so now we want to break this into some chunks. So what we're going to use is a little plugin called Cell Fracture, which comes included with Blender. So go to Preferences, go to Get Extensions, and if you type in Cell Fracture, mine is already installed, so I'm not getting an install button, but it should pop up. And then just check that it's enabled, because for some reason mine has turned off there. So I'm going to turn that on. And then if you go to Object, Quick Effects, and choose Cell Fracture, we get a whole bunch of scary numbers. And the only one that I want to choose is this source limit, sorry. I'm going to set that to 5. So that should reduce the amount of chunks, and I've accidentally clicked it off. Let's have another go. Quick Effects, Cell Fracture, 5, and then we hit OK. And it does its work. And then it's going to create our original cube underneath, which we don't need that anymore, so we can delete that. And now if I pull these away, we've got a full set. So we could do some rigid body simulations in Blender. And, let's do a little bonus lesson work. I'll show you how you can do that, just so you've got it, because it's nice to know. So I'm just going to save this scene out first, and we're going to call it Site Game Elements. So if you wanted the physics in Blender to do all the calculations for you, select these objects, go to Rigid Body and choose Add Active. And then we're going to make it something for it to collide with. So I'm going to make a quick plane. I'm going to put it down, scale it. And then we are going to go to Object, Rigid Body, Add Passive. And then if we hit play, we've got our automatic fracturing block. Cool, but I don't want to do it like that. We're going to do this old school hand animation style. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to join all of these objects together. And we're going to hit Control J. And then I've had some issues with this, so I'm just going to select everything and then hit M to merge by distance. And if I go back in now and select one of these faces, it should retain these edges. But I have found with sometimes if I haven't merged the vertices, these faces can disappear. So we should be good now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called a shape key. And what that lets us do is take the mesh, move elements about, and then keyframe the slider between the two. I'll show you what I mean. So we need to go over here to the data section with our object selected and hit the first button. And this is our default state, our basis. So we then make another one. So just for the sake of argument, I'm going to pick this element up. So I'm going to click one face and then hit the L key. And we're just going to move it over like this. And then if I hit the tab key, you'll see it returns back to where it was. And now this slider, as I move that, I can control, it's like a tweening between the two states. So let's delete this because I don't actually want that to happen. So let's assume this block's going to fall down. And what I want to do is just put some very slight movement on some of these blocks at the bottom. So we're going to hit the L key, and then I'm going to pivot around this point at the bottom. So if I then choose this vertex here, I just click it off and then click on again, and then hit the full stop key and choose active element. Then if I double tap the R key to rotate, I can kind of rotate it around this point. So I just want to break it away from the box just slightly. So maybe something like this, and you get to choose how much it's breaking apart. So hit the tab key now, and we can just kind of slide like that. So we're going to do this on a few of these shapes. So let's go back into here, use the L key, select this one, and we're going to do the same trick. So hit 1 on the keypad, and then select and unselect, and it will still be an active element, so we can rotate slightly away, and we just want to sort of break the box like this. That's looking cool. And there's going to be a bit of intersection, but it doesn't really matter, Because I don't want this tutorial to be 9 hours long, we're going to do stuff roughly, and I'm going to leave it to you to put the polish in. So let's just move this one. I really love this technique for doing like quick animation stuff, and you'd be surprised how much stuff you can actually kind of get away with animating in this style and not having to do rigs or... So let's just... And so I think because everything else has moved away, we need to just animate this part as well. So make sure we're using the L key, not the K key. And then I think this would rotate down slightly and something like that. So it's kind of, yeah, that looks convincing. Cool. So we're not going to do the animation yet, but to give you an idea of how this would work, we can keyframe the height. So we'll start up there, hit I to keyframe it, and we'll do this again properly in our finished scene. And then move it out to, I've already made a mess of this. Just going to undo that. Okay, so we're going to move this up here, hit I to keyframe our location, and we'll move it for, I don't know why it's moving like that. I think I might still have rigid bodies applied to, have I still got rigid? Yeah, okay. If, like me, you were showing off something, let's just remove the rigid body. So we do that by going to Object, Rigid Bodies, Remove, and never hit line on happens. Great. See, I'm always in two minds about whether to leave these mistakes in, but this is the reality of working in Blender, that you will do things, and it's no good me showing you how to do it perfectly, and then you're getting stuck in a tutorial because you don't know how to undo that. So if you ever accidentally applied a rigid body, that's what's happened. So you just go to Object, Rigid Body, Remove. Okay, so I've got a keyframe there, and let's just have it falling at 10, and we'll keyframe that. Like that, and then when it hits the ground at 10, we're going to keyframe our value here. So maybe it needs to start just before, I don't know, let's try it. So we're going to hit I, let's hover over there, and then we're going to move over 2 keyframes and put that to 1, and hit I there. So you'll see that it hits the ground and it fractures. Boom. Nice. We've done all of that without physics, without any really complicated animation. And let's just remove all of our animation data for now, because we're going to recreate it in the scenes we need it. And let's return this to 0, 0. Nice. Okay, so let's name this Falling Stone, capital step for some reason. And we'll just push that away. And we'll do our shader in our game engine, our game scene, because we already built that. Okay, let's do some plants. So very simple. I'm going to make a plane, and we're going to cut the plane in half. Control R to use the loop cut. I'm going to delete that face, and then we're going to add a mirror modifier. So we've now got exactly what we had before, but we can cut to an overhead view, and we can just tweak the shape a bit. So let's put 2 loop cuts in and bring this whole edge in. And I'm just trying to think off the top of my head what a leaf looks like. I think I'd never seen one before. So something like this maybe. Completely depends on what kind of plant you're designing. Maybe it needs to be a little bit rounded at the top, more kind of tapered, and then quite often thicker at the bottom. Okay, so it's not a great plant, but you can see what we're working towards. So let's put another loop cut in here, and then we're going to pull this down. And we're not going to use the extrude key, so we're going to use the G and move it down. Right, there we go. And let's now select that edge and extrude slightly out. So we're going to select like that. And we're going to use vertex select and just select Control Shift from one end to the other, and we can pull this up slightly. And I think this could slide down more. So it's kind of a feathery shape. Let's go into the side view, and also so we can see exactly what we're working with. We're just going to put a little bit of a lift in the center. So let's use our proportional edit, and yours might be set to a massive size, and we just want to kind of rounded. Something like that. And we're going to select this vertex here, and then hit Shift and S, cursor to selected. Tab out, so we're in object mode, and then go to set origin 3D cursor. So you remember that from before. So now we're going to pivot around that point. And then I just want to select everything with the A key, and then I'm going to hit Alt-Me, extrude faces on normal. I'm just going to give it a little bit of thickness. So I'm going to keep this low poly, but you could apply a subdivision surface, and you've got kind of a leaf there. Let's turn that off there. Okay, we're going to apply our mirror. I think I'm happy with that. And now if we rotate it on the X-axis, we've got something like this. So let's just pull it down like that. And then I'm going to hit Shift and S and put cursor world origin. And then we're going to select our leaf and do something like that. So it's just away from the center. And then we are going to use one of my favorite tools, the spin tool. So face select, hit A to select everything. And then if you click this button, choose spin, hopefully it's on the right orientation. If it isn't, then you need to change the values here. I'll show you this in a second. So we'll set this to 360. And we will set the steps to, let's try 5. Yeah, I think that works. Obviously they're crashing into each other a bit at the moment, but we'll fix that. So if for any reason your orientation is not correct, you can see it's set to -1 here. Set it to 1 there, and 0 there, or rotate it around a different axis. Made a tall leaf propeller there. And you can have, I mean, that's kind of cool for something else, but something at Half-Life. So let's just set that back to where we were. Okay, so we're then going to delete what's highlighted because it duplicates on top of each other. Always. Okay, so now we're going to select everything with the A key. And we're going to choose P, separate by loose parts. So now each of these should be a separate element. And what I can do is I can then select one, click our proportional editing, turn on random, and then also hit the tab key to choose individual origins. And if we scale now, they should all scale at slightly different amounts, so we get a bit of variation there. And I'm going to turn that off again, and I'm just going to pull some of these away slightly. So it's not the end of the world if they're crashing into each other, but and you can adjust the rotation of them. Just create a little bit of variety within the plants. It might make this one flatter actually. And we can also going back to our proportion edit and turn it into smooth mode, we could select some of these and just change like the angle of some of the leaves. So, you know, you can get into this as much as you want. You can create the perfect, realistic, botanically accurate plant of your dream. I think this will do for me for now. So we're going to select all of these, Shift and D, and then scale them in and position them in the center, and we'll rotate them a bit. Scale them down more in the center, but then scale them up. Let's change this to bounding box center now. So full stop, bounding box center, and then we'll just scale it up and rotate. So creating kind of more leaves inside the plant. This one is in a tricky spot, so we'll pull that up. So it's not the most beautiful plant you've ever seen. It's not the best bit of low poly design, but in our scene, it's going to be that big, and that looks great for what we need. So I don't want to group these all together and join them, because I want to do the trick where each bit of shading has a different color. So, or each leaf has a different shade of color using the random element in our shading. So we're just going to select them all and make a new collection. Something cool like that. So we'll just save our scene again, and then we're going to get on to the tricky one. Okay, so we're just going to turn this group off for now, and the whole idea for this came because I was messing about using the array modifier in Blender to make some wires, and I discovered that you could make it follow a path, but also you could put a cap on the top and the bottom of the whatever you made. So I was using this to make wires with kind of connectors on. I was like, oh, you could make like stretch limos, and you could make a snake with it. I was like, oh, I'm going to try that. So this is what we're going to do. And we're going to do this roughly because, again, I don't want to spend an hour just making a snake. So you're going to have to bear with me, and maybe you want to spend some time and do this properly, but you'll get the idea, and then you can go away and make your own version of this. So let's just turn off that folding stone because we don't want that either. I'm going to make a circle with 8 segments in it. I'm going to rotate it on the y-axis 90 degrees, and then I'm going to make sure I come back into select box with all of our vertices selected. We're going to hit E and extrude on the X, and then we're going to put in 3 loop cuts should do the job. So we need those loop cuts in just to make it more flexible. Again, all of this will make more sense as we go, but so we're going to take that shape, and I think, we'll do it later on. Okay, so we're going to select this edge here, and then hit Shift and D to duplicate it, and then hit P to separate. So now we should have another element we can work with. So I'm going to leave that where it is. Yeah, let's move this along. So we want to make sure that these can all join up. So we're going to duplicate again. So we use one part to make the head and one part to make the tail. So let's start with the tail because that's nice and easy. Let's do something rattlesnakey. Oh, we've got proportion editing turned on. Again, if you ever find that Blender's doing weird stuff when you're trying to move vertices around, it's quite often because you've got proportion editing turned on. So I'm going to make a little kind of taper, and then we will extrude again and scale down again, and then just face it. And because we're going to subdivide this, let's turn this into quads. So let's select both of those and hit J to make one edge. Make sure you hit J and not F. It will cause you many issues. Now I'm going to hit J again, and it should automatically put a cut through. So we've got quads now. Always happy to see quads. Maybe this is a little bit too stubby. It's going to be a cartoon snake. Let's go with that for now, actually. So we'll put in 4 loop cuts and click to leave them where they are. Then we're going to use bevel and make kind of these grooves, and then we're going to hit Alt and E and extrude along normal, and we're just going to hold that out. So we should have a kind of rattlesnake type tail. And let's do the head. So this is going to be the most difficult bit we do. So we're going to select all of these, and then I'm going to just flip into the side view. I'm going to extrude, and let's rotate that before we extrude anymore. So just using extrude, rotate, and scale. And ideally you would have some snake reference, which is not a phrase I say very often, but so we're just going to keep tweaking bits until okay. We'll do some tidying up as we go. So snake head's kind of like this, and then I think they actually get kind of flatter than you'd expect. So at the moment we're making a bit of a worm, but let's cap off this end again. So extrude, scale, and F, and we'll just pull that out slightly. And then we're just going to do the same trick. So both of those J, and then both of those J, and now we've got quads. Okay, how can we make this more snake-like? So what we're going to do is we're going to solo this. Going to transparent mode and view from above, and then we're going to delete half the vertex because there's no point in making both sides when we can just mirror it. So mirror, make sure you're on the y-axis, turn clipping, turn on transparent. Okay, so let's see if we can try and push this into more of a snake type shape. Yeah, I think that's right. So pull those in. I think this wants to be much flatter. Pull this down. And likewise with this. So actually, I think maybe if we pull this one forward a bit. Just turn the X-ray to make sure it starts in all of those. It's kind of snake-like. And definitely the sensible thing to do would have been to get my reference and work on top of it. So I suggest that you find a nice 2D side view of a snake to work on. I think we're getting kind of the ballpark shape. And now I want to make an eye shape for it. So let's select all four of those faces. I'm going to insert just a bit. And then we're going to slide these along. So double tap in each one twice, G. Let's just undo this because I did not explain what I was doing very well there. So we're going to select each of these and then the G twice to slide it. So it's going to slide along the polygon. And it's just going to keep doing that until we've got roughly a circle shape. So it's going to be perfect. We're going to use a couple of tricks, but we're going to kind of push this back. Be kind of there on the snake, and I'm making a cartoon type snake, so absolutely doesn't need to be realistic, which is good because it won't be, but I want the eye to be nice and big on the side like this. Now you should have loop tools enabled on any tutorial you do of mine because it's the most useful tool, but just in case you haven't, it'll be under preferences, get extensions, loop tools, and then make sure it's enabled in add-ons. So now if we right click, choose loop tools, we should be able to hit the circle button and it'll just round off our shape better. So I'm just going to pull it back a little bit. We need to select this middle one too and just pull it back. And then we're going to hit I to insert and then G to pull it back in and scale it down a bit as well. Let's just get rid of this. So we've got kind of a recess for our eye. And then I'm going to hit I to insert again, and then I'm going to use G to pull this out and scale it down. So I'm going to make like a pupil, and then let's do the eccentric again. So I want my snake to have a big eye like this. We'll just hit E to extrude and scale it down. Cool. And then the only thing left to add in is a tongue. I don't think this is too bad for a bit of freestyle snake making, you know? So we'll just select this vertex here and hit Shift and S, cursor to selected, and then tab into object mode, Shift and A, mesh, plane. We're just going to scale this down, scale it down on the Y, and pull this edge forward, and then put a loop cut in, Control and R. Hit the one key to select these edges, pull this back on the X. That's the wrong way. I just want to select this middle one. Pull that back on the X. I forget what a snake's tongue looked like. And then we're just going to hit the 3 key to go into face mode, hit A to select all, E to extrude down, and there we've got a tongue. Okay, and we can probably just connect this back to this now. So Control and J. And we're going to put our subdivision surface on. I think that looks pretty good. Kind of happy with that. Maybe his tongue's a little bit fine. So we can edit that by going back in and selecting L. And then let's just put a loop cut here as well, thicken it out a little bit. No, I think that's looking good. So the only thing I want to sharpen up is around his eye. So we'll just put a loop cut in here, and maybe one on the pupil as well. Cool. So let's go back, and we're going to turn off our subdivision for now, and we're going to apply our mirror. So let's name this snake head, and name this snake tail, and then select middle. So let's test out our array. So we're going to add a modifier, and we're going to go to array. And we're going to set this to, I think it needs to be on the y-axis. No, it needs to be on the z-axis. And we'll use -z for now. So if we dial up our count, we've got our infinitely long snake, and you can see that we could use this as part of the mechanic, because in the game, when the snake eats the pellet, it grows, and that makes the game more difficult as you start tripping over yourself. So we're going to use that later on, and we're going to go to caps, and cap start, we're going to use the eyedropper, and we're going to pick the head, and you'll see at the moment, if I move this away, it's not quite connecting up. And the reason for that is that our origin is here, but Blender seems to want it to be in a completely different place. So we can leave the origin, we're not going to touch that, we're going to move everything around it. So select your head, tab into it, and then hit A to select everything. And then if you use the G key and slide, we're just going to move it back on the X-axis until it's touching the edge. And if we just go back to this, we want to make sure that we've got merge enabled. And I'm going to do the same thing on the back end. So if we choose end and then click on the tail, and that actually should snap into place. But if it doesn't, you know the trick now is to select everything, and you can move it on the x-axis until it clicks into place. So now if we add our subdivision surface, and so it looks like it's not quite merging the way we want. So we're just going to tweak this. There we go. So we can just dial that up until it's hand shade smooth. And we've still got a little bit of a seam. Let's just see something obvious going on there. Let's just check if our face orientation is looking right. That's the problem. So the face orientation on the head is basically the wrong way around. Yours might not be the case, but we're just going to fix it just in case. So interface mode, select everything, halt, then recalculate outside. Oh, still got a little... What's going on here, eh? Okay, yeah, and then we're just going to dial it up until it's smooth. Nice. And now we have Infinity Snake because we can... So later on, we're going to have this following a path, and it's going to look great. Maybe the body is a little bit thick. I don't know. I think we're good. Let's not worry about it. Perfect. So we're just going to save this, and then we're going to build our textures now before we go into the next part of the game. So we're going to turn off everything for now. So turn off subdivision, and we'll turn off our array. So we're back to our original objects. And let's start by making our base materials. So make sure you're in shader mode, and we're going to create snake skin. So let's make it an unsurprising green, maybe a bit darker for me, and dial down the roughness, but we're going to use this later on to do some interesting stuff. And let's just work on the snake head for now, and then we'll copy the materials across, and I'll try and explain why as we go. So let's do the eye. In fact, we can make all of our slots now. So we want one for the pupil, one for the white of the eye, one for the tongue. So let's name this eye white. Oh, didn't need to make that. Let's name this eye dark, and let's just set the color now so we can. Dial down the roughness, wants to be quite shiny. Same with this. And then we'll make a new material, and we'll call it snake tongue. We'll make that red. And we can tweak these as we apply them. So back into edit mode, and then if we hit the L key, and then select the tongue, and hit assign. So we've got a nice red tongue. We can't use L on this. What we can do is, I might actually pull this out a little bit more as well. So we're going to select these 4 faces. And if you then go to select and more, I've mapped a shortcut to mine. We did this in the previous lesson. So you can change the shortcut here. I like to use the square brackets to go up and down. So I'm just going to pull this out a little bit more. So I want it to feel more stepped. So let's actually keep expanding out and choose eye white. And then reduce our expansion. And then choose eye black. There we go. He's kind of cute. And we're actually going to make one more color slot. And we're going to call that tail snip. And we'll just give it like a kind of brown for now. So now if I select both of these objects and then select this one, Control L and link materials, they've all got the same. So it's important that all of the elements have got the same materials. Otherwise, the array gets confused. So we're going to select these ones. And what's the best way of selecting these? So I think if we go into edge mode, Alt Shift on these. So we're just going to select these edges like this. And then you have to go vertice and then face. Although we can expand it out. We'll choose snake skin, tail skin, sorry. Shade. And maybe we'll make this color, make this the tail skin as well. It's up to you. You can use your creative brain. Why did my brain fail on the word brain? What does that tell you? We don't need to do anything on this for now. So if we turn back on our array, subdivision, we've got a daft little cartoon snake. And I forgot that I have turned off mirror, so we need to do the eyes on the other side. That's a nice quick job. I need to remember to pull this out because I did on the other side. Okay, and then we're just going to select out and choose eye white, and then select back and choose eye black. And there we go, it's updated in our snake. Great, and now we want to make a kind of snake skin texture. So we'll click on our snake middle and go into shading, and we can actually just turn these off for now. So we're going to use the brick texture again. I've used this in quite a few tutorials. Make sure you've got your node wrangler enabled. So it should, in fact, be turned on by default. Or it should be installed by default, and then just check it's installed in add-ons. So you've got node wrangler. And then if we control shift on the brick texture, we've got some crazy stuff going on at the moment, and that is because we haven't unwrapped our objects. So let's go back into layout and let's turn off everything for now. So I want to put a loop cut we shouldn't be able to get away with just putting a loop cut at the top. So we're going to select that edge and then choose mark the seam. When I said loop cut, I meant a seam arms. I've already covered a lot of stuff here. My brain is leaking. Okay, so we've marked our seam and then we're going to go to UV editing. And let's just bring it back so we can see that and turn on our shading. And then if we select the face and then hit A, select everything, UV, unwrap angle based, we should get this section completely unwrapped. Now, if we now go back to our shading editor, we're going to hit Control and T, not twice, and change this to UV. And now our brick texture should look right. So we're going to need to do that on the other two elements as well. So let's go back into UV editing and turn back on these parts. The snake in particular looks weird because it's UV mapped onto a tiny space. So this might have a bit of stretching going on. Let's just turn it into this view. So Alt-Shift on this edge is actually going to put a loop all the way down the middle. I think that's fine for what we're doing. It's going to be so tiny. So mark seam, and then A, select everything, UV, angle based unwrap. So we've got a bit of stretching going on. So what we could actually do, I think, to improve that is if we separate this part out and Alt-Shift on here as well, and just work our way around to make sure we've got all of that. Right-click and mark seam, and we're just going to turn this back to a clear seam. So let's see what happens now. If we hit A, select everything, UV, unwrap. It's kind of slackened off a little bit. I think that should give us what we need. So if we now, yeah. I know it looks a bit odd, this brick snake at the moment, but it's kind of going to, it'll make some sense. And we're just going to do the same thing here. So again, we can probably just Alt-Shift click there, mark seam, select that loop, mark seam, loop, then get select these faces, clear seam, hit select everything, UV, angle based unwrap. There we go. Okay, so if we now go to shading, and let's turn back on our modifiers. We want snake middle. So I want to see the whole thing. It's a weird looking guy, but, and let's reduce this, so let's reduce this like brick width. So get something more like this. And we can also change the rotation on the Z axis, so it's kind of more angled. And then I want to change the scale, so we're going to select everything, and let's try the scale of 0.5. Now, we do have some kind of edges here that are not ideal. It's because our segment is so small. Just going to see if there's anything we can do about that. It's just kind of smooth over there. I think by the time it's actually textured up and shaded, you're not going to notice so much, but I think that's going to be okay for what we're doing. Again, you can decide how much this bothers you. So what I want to do now is put that into our principal shader, not as the base color. So if we go back to here, and then if we connect this up to our roughness, we get a kind of scaly pattern, but I'm going to invert that. I'm going to use a color ramp to do that. So search color ramp, my most used node for everything. And if we just swap the ends, so now the scales are kind of rougher and the inside is shinier. Don't know if that's correct for a snake. And we can change the value here. The effect we want. And maybe he's a little bit too shiny, so we'll just make this black and more grey. So subtle, it just kind of picks up the edges. And we're going to use another color ramp and a bump node. So same trick. Color ramp. And then search bump. And we're going to connect the color to the heights. And the heights and then the bump to the normal. And you can see it's now stepped up. So let's take the strength down a little bit. So it's just going to catch the light a bit. Cool. And then the only other thing that I want to tweak is that we could also change the color of the scales. So if we Control Shift back on this, you can see that we've got two colors in there. And if we change the bias, you can alter how many are darker or lighter. So let's do something like that. And then go to color ramp. Connect the color up again. Put the color into the base color. And then we're going to have darker green at one end. And we'll need to tweak these. We can't actually see what's going on at the moment. Okay, something. I don't really like these colours, but I think the difference is too pronounced and this is too neon. So let's take our saturation down. Something like this, and then make this more like a brown. That's looking better. I think it just disconnects because I liked this colour that we had before. So we'll copy that hex value there. And then we're going to drop it into here as well. And then just pull the saturation down. Just pull this down a little bit. There we go. Nicer. Cool. So he's a little bit of a derpy looking snake, but I think that does the job nicely. So let's save this. And then we need to, let's put all of these in a group. And then we're going to select the snake. Let's turn on our ground shrub and our falling stone. So at the moment, our snake, you can see from the size of this, is way too big. Let's scale it now before we come into any problems. So select all three of these and hit scale. And let's just use this as a reference. That's looking right. That's one square. So much better. Okay, so now we can select objects. This is always a bit fiddly. Let's just go Control, select all of these by hand. And there we go. So now we can hit Control and C and copy them. And then if we go back to our previous scene, let's just save it again for good measure. Go back into the layout view. Snap to our camera. If you've got this big grey expanse, it's because our volume cube is in the way. I found that when I load up a scene and I've got a volume cube, it's miscalculated and everything looks super foggy. If you should move to playhead, give it a chance to recalculate, it'll be fine. So we're going to hit Control and V and all of our objects are in the scene. And they're maybe still too big. I think we scaled everything down as we went, but we can tweak all of this. Let's just pull this off to the side so we can see everything. Cool. So we're going to just save this now, and then we will jump on to... I'm still having some XR data issues. I'm just going to turn that off for now. Save this for now. Okay, so let's hide all of this stuff for now. So I'll just come out of this mode. And I think it's put my groups in weird places. Yeah, so let's just select all of these, and we should have lost our groups as we've gone, which is annoying. So I'm going to select all of these, and we're just going to move these to elements to sort. And let's rename these parts now before we forget. Rename active item. Yep. Battery name. Set name. Leaf. It's like spell it leaf. Okay, here we go. I've done that wrong. Battery name. We want it to be new name. Okay, there we go. So the next thing we want to do is build our path, and let's turn off our volume cube for now because it's just in the way. Reduce that collection, and it's in lights, so we'll just turn this off in the scene for now. I'm going to snap to the overhead view, and what we're going to do is create a new curve, but we're going to start by making a single vertex. So Shift and A, mesh, single vert, add single vert. If you haven't got add single vert, make sure you've got I think it's called mesh, extra mesh objects. So it's contained in there, so install that. And we'll just close this down. We need to move this up so we can see it. And annoyingly, Blender's not very good at showing me a single vertex in edit mode. And there we go. So just tap into our number 1 key. Okay, so just pull it up so we can see it above the surface. Okay, so what I want to do is extrude our path, but I want it to snap to the center of each square like it would in the game. So we're going to undo that. And we're going to go up here to our grid. I'm going to change the scale to 0.5 because we want it to snap into the middle of the square. And then if we go up to here, click on snap and make sure this is set to grid. If I now hit the E key to extrude, it's going to snap to the center. It'll snap to the edge and then to the center. So we're just going to plot a path. And it doesn't really matter what you plot here. You can make it as interesting as you like. I'm just going to keep going. Maybe put a wiggle in here. So I'm just using the E key to extrude each time. And then background. And then we're just going to select that last face like that with the Shift key and then hit F to connect them up. So now we've got a path. And the next thing I want to do is bevel all of these corners. So if we hit the A key and then make sure we've got bevel selected, and nothing's going to happen when we pull it out, so we'll change the vertices. And let's make this pretty tight. So it's a tight turn, but we'll just bump up these. And now what I need to do is put some loop cuts in between each of these corners so that there's more space. So we can select just the edges. When I say more space, I mean there's more vertice information for Blender to use, and you'll see why shortly, because we're going to adhere this to the surface of our floor, which you'll remember we made, just to make things harder, we made a bit bumpy and uneven. Okay, so we've selected all of those edges, and then we'll hit the 1 key and choose right click, subdivide, and then where it says number of cuts, we're just going to increase that. The reason we couldn't select everything is these corners will become super dense, which we don't want. You can already see it's getting quite dense there, but I think we'll be okay. And now what I want to do is we need to map this to the height of these tiles. So we're going to have to do a little bit of messing about here. So the first thing to do is select this floor tiles group, and we're going to duplicate this collection. And we'll just hide this for now. And we're going to name this guide mesh. And then we're going to select everything in here. And then just hit the Shift key to select one object, and then hit Control and J. And now we've got one universal object. And you'll notice it works because everything will go one color. And just to check we haven't got any problems, let's tab in, hit the 1 key, hit A to select everything, and hit M to merge by distance, and it should just remove any overlapping vertices, which will help us out. So now what we want to do is let's just select both of these objects with the Shift key, and then use the backslash key to go into solo edit mode. Don't know why this leaf's on the scene. We've clearly connected a leaf to something, so we're just going to separate that out. And let's just do the same thing again. There we go. Okay, so what we can do is use something called the shrink wrap modifier to apply this so it fits over the surface. I'm going to select our path and then go to add modifier, search, shrink wrap. And then we're going to choose our target object, and that's kind of done a pretty good job already. I like to use project and then just pull this down on the Z axis, and you need to turn off snapping. Pull this down on the Z axis and you'll see, oh, we need to make sure that we've got our Z axis turned on there. So you need to pull it down until it starts to slot over the surface. So there we go. Now it's following our uneven surface tile, and we can then create an offset if we need to, but we're actually going to apply this in a second. So take a good look at your path and decide if this is what you want your game to look like. I think it's going to work for us. And we're going to choose down arrow and choose apply. And then I want to go to object, convert to curve, and it should remain looking pretty much the same. But we're just going to pull this up and come out to solo mode. And we can now get rid of our guide mesh, but we're actually just going to turn it off because you never know, we might need it again. We might want to make some changes. And now we've got a path for our object to follow. Let's just save everything. So let's save incremental. And then if we go to our objects to saw, elements to saw, let's take our snake, select all three objects and move it into a new group. So we're making a collection called snake. And we want to take this middle element, snake middle, and we're going to go and add another modifier. We're going to choose curve. Now, things are going to get weird and crazy, and we might have to do some fixing, but let's see what happens if we now choose our curve object. And our snake has moved into position, but it's not the position we want. So if we set this location to 0, should now be essentially following the path. And if I move the object on the y-axis, on the x-axis, sorry, you'll see that our snake follows along the path. And it does a little bit of stretching as it goes around corners. But for the most part, looking pretty good. Let's increase the length a bit. And as we move along the x-axis, I'm not moving along the right, find it here. So let's use the slider up here. Okay, so I think it's a bit big at the moment, so we're just going to scale it down. That's the scale, and you'll notice that he's kind of sat above the path at the moment. Don't know why I've gendered my snake. It's sat above the path. So we're going to put it down on the z-axis, and it should still remain following. And you can see as we get to a bump, it goes up and over. Nice. So now what we need to do is keyframe. So let's pick a starting location. We can start here, it's fine. So let's pull it back to 0 and hit I on our locations. And then if we put it all the way over here, and then we're going to try and match it up as best we can. So remember that the head's at this point here. And we're just going to keep dragging around until it's kind of that, I think. And we're going to hit apply again. And now if we play our animations, switch our camera mode, our snake is passing around the level. Perfect. And it loops nicely. Cool, so now we've got the snake following the path. Let's look at doing the power-ups and changing the length of the snake as it eats eats the power-ups. So it's pretty easy to do. It just could be a little bit time consuming. So let's just go to our power-up folder, and I'm going to select these ones, select hierarchy, and delete. We don't need that now. And let's select this power-up. So what we're going to do is we're going to position these along the path. And you remember from the first lesson that we have a point light inside, so we need to make sure we're selecting them each time. Okay, so we're going to go to our top view, and if we just wind the track head back, we can see the path that the snake's following. So let's put our first one. I'm going to turn on snap in again, and we're going to position it here. So first pellet, and then we're going to shift D, and let's carry on placing them on the root. Something like this that kind of makes it look like the player is reacting to where they're being placed. I can edit everyone there. Let's put one there, and yeah, that should do us. So we'll just escape out of that. So what we need to do is make these appear in front of the snake as it goes. And the easiest way to do that, I looked at a few different routes to do this, but I think the easiest way is if we position them off camera until we need them. So this one can stay where it is, but we're going to select all of these other ones. We'll just select this group like this to make sure I've got everything. And then we're just going to pull it up to 9 meters. So if we then switch our camera view, you'll see that it's out of shot. And then we're going to select this first object, and let's pull our camera. So rotating the camera around, we're going to work out at what point the snake would eat it. So I reckon this is going to be the frame before, so we need to make sure we're on the frame before, and we're just going to hit I to keyframe it. And then this is the frame that I think we need to make it disappear. So we're going to hit G, and then pull it up, and if I can just type in 9 in there, and then hit I, hovering over that to keyframe it, and let's just back it up. So there we go. It gives the impression that the snake's eating it. So we're going to work our way around. As the snake eats it, we want on the next frame, the next element, the next power-up to drop. So that's our first one. This is going to be our second one. So we can actually just work our way down this list now because we made them in order. So we're going to set the height of this to, I think it's going to be 1 meter. And it's sunk through the tile, so let's try 1.5. In fact, let's just back up to see where this one is set to, because that's the right height. 1.35. So we're going to select this icosphere again and set that to 1.35 and keyframe it. We actually need to make sure that we keyframed at 9 meters beforehand as well. So when it eats that one, it disappears. And then we're going to do the same trick. So this is the frame before. Keyframe. And then we're going to set this to 9 meters. And keyframe it. I'm going to do one more, and then we will time lapse out. So this is the frame where it eats the snake. So we're going to hit I to keyframe at 9 meters, eats the snake, eats the power up. And then we're going to drag this down to character 5, so it pops it there in the scene. So we need to make sure we keyframe it. And so that's the frame before it gets eaten. So we'll keyframe there. And then that wants to be returned to 9 meters. Keyframe that. And if we just wind back our playhead, see that the snake goes around, and as it eats them, as it hits the point in the animation. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go through and do the rest. I'm going to time lapse it because you don't need to watch me do all of these. You understand what I'm doing now, and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so this is what I've come up with. So as this snake goes around, he's going to pick up the pellets. Nice. Okay, so now let's do our snake growing effects. So I'm going to make it so that each time it eats a pellet, the snake grows by a factor of 3. So we're going to set the count to 3 and hit I to keyframe that first frame. And then it's just a case of going through again. Let's go to the overhead view so we can see better. Every time it would eat the pellet, we're going to keyframe the count again. So let's, just for ease, put a keyframe beforehand just before we change it. So 1, and as it eats it, go to the next frame, and we'll bump it to 6 and hit I. So boom. Okay, and we're going to carry on. And the reason we put a keyframe before is to make sure that it doesn't try and smooth between. So this is going to be 9. I'm going to do maths in my head, the worst kind of maths. Look at me being proud of being able to add 3 at a time. So this is going to be 12. And let's make this, so we're just going to keyframe the frame before and then do the same thing again. I'm going to make this one 15. And 18. It's 21, had to think then. Okay, and this should be the last one. And 24. Okay, and as we start again, back to 3. So every time it eats a pellet, the snake gets a bit longer. Cool, time to save again. Okay, cool. So what we want to do now is bring in our stone, our falling block effect. So I'm just going to turn off snapping for now, and we're just going to move it over and then flip the camera so we're looking over the top, and let's just scale it so it fits that space over there. And I noticed that it's got the keyframes for the separation that we want to get rid of that. So with falling stone selected, expand it out. Yours might be collapsed like this, so we're going to expand out key, and then we're going to choose animation, and we're going to we need to expand that again. There we go. And we're going to delete that. So now it's not animating anymore. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull this. In fact, let's link our material first. So select that material from the block, Control L, link materials, and then we're going to move it up on the scene. Perfect. So let's just go to our top view, and I want to make it look like it's avoiding these objects as they fall. So let's set our origin to the center of the geometry as best we can. In fact, let's do it properly. Let's tab, select everything, and then just move it so that the origin's more centralized. And we're going to work out where these need to fall in the scene. So I want to make it look like it's just missed one here. So I'm going to put one here, and then I want to try and explain why it's done a little wiggle there. Maybe one here and one here. And you can have as many as you want, but I think this will do for us for now. So we're going to select all 4 of these, and then we pulled them up. We just want to make sure that they're out of shot for the camera. Let's move it up like that. And we only need to animate one of these to start with. So this is the first one to drop. Let's turn off camera spinning for now so we can see what we're doing. So we're going to keyframe, and rather than using the I key, I want to right click and choose insert single frame. I just want to keyframe the Z axis. So let's pull that to like 11 and work out where that needs to fall. Nice. And then we're going to hit the right click on it again and choose insert single keyframe. So if we back it up now and play it back, Let's just see how it looks from our camera view. Yeah, that's about the right sort of speed to fall. If you wanted it to fall slower, you could pick up this point and move it, and you get a slower drop. So that's up to you, but I think 11 frames looks right for me. And then if you remember from before, we want to keyframe this key here. If we slide that, so frame before, just before it hits the ground, we're going to put keyframe in there. So that it's starting to break when it hits, and then it's falling apart there. So let's set that value to 1. So it's only happening over 2 keyframes. It should be small enough to give the effect. Nice. Let's just see it from our camera. Perfect. So obviously it's happening at the wrong point at the moment. So we're going to select all of these, and then we're going to work out where we want the block. So maybe just after the snake has passed through. Something like that. So we're just going to pick up these points and drag them. So maybe that's a little bit late. So now we've done it with 1, I'm actually going to delete these. And we're going to reuse this objects. So let's switch to the top view and put them back where we want them. So I think I decided 1 there, 1 here, and 1 here. And now all we need to do is work through and work out where we want them to trigger. So they're all in the same space at the moment. Let's have this one falling like here. So just use the G key and move them along. And then this one can fall maybe here. So I'm just going to use G and slide these along again. And then select this last one last. And let's make this look like a real, like, split decision. So, okay, let's play our animation back and see what we've got. So just wait for everything to reset. Cool. It's looking really nice. Okay, well, one more thing we could do just to put a bit of variety in this is we could just rotate this 90 degrees, rotate this one 180 degrees, and we're likely to just move it slightly, and we'll rotate this one -90, so that not all, even though it's the same block and the same animation, because they're falling in different angles, they'll look a bit different. Sweet. Okay, we're going to save this. So let's quickly bring our plants in and just add a bit more decoration to our scene. So we're going to select all of these. Excuse me. Make sure we've got everything selected. And then let's go over here and choose our grass. And then Control-L, link materials. And let's put them into our scene. So side view, get them kind of roughly in place. And then we can position and scale. I think I want bounding box center, so full stop bounding box center, so that it treats all the objects as one. It might be quite nice to have like a couple of them at different sizes. So, it's no right or wrong, just where you feel they look best. Just added a nice little bit of variety to our scene. Nice. Okay, what else do I want to add in? So I'd like to add some particles. I'm going to do 2 more particle systems to finish this off. So the first thing I'd like to happen is there to be like a little cloud of maybe dust or like broken tile from where these rocks land. So this is nice and easy to do. So we're going to need 2 elements for this. We're going to need an emitter. So we're going to use an icosphere for that. We're going to use icospheres for all of this. So this is the area that the particles are going to come from. And then we're also going to make another object called particle. Let's call it dust. And I actually think I want to make this lower poly. So we're just going to add a decimate modifier on it. And let's make the ratio 0.5, so it's a bit more like angular. Maybe we'll go even. So it's more like a rock. That'll do for what I want. Okay, so we're just going to apply that. And we're going to link the material. So it's the same color as the tile. So what we're going to do is select this object and we're going to choose this particles tab, and everything is black until we add in particle system. We'll just name this dust cloud. So you can see now we've got odd things happening, but we're going to fix that. So we're going to wind the tape head back to 0, and we're going to change to our particle section and go down to this tab that says render, and instead of render as halo, we're going to choose object, and we're going to use the eyedropper to choose our particle dust. And then in this, we're going to turn off show emitter, and in viewport display, we're also going to turn off show emitter. So now you can see lots of tiny little rocks forming, which is cool, but not what we want. So first thing first, we're going to increase the scale, and we're going to change the scale randomness. And what we want to happen is we want these to emit very briefly and firing outwards. So at the moment, they start at 1 and they emit 200 frames, which is not what we want. So we want them to emit from frame 1 to, let's say, frame 3, and we want them to live for 10 frames, and we can add a little bit of randomness in there as well. So if we play it right now, we get this. Okay, let's just start. There's way too many, so let's set the number to 20 and then play back again. That's getting there. Because the object is falling down, I want them to shoot up. So if we go to physics and then, so velocity, and then we're going to change the Z meters per second. Let's try 5, see how that looks. So now kind of shoot up. And if we also add some Y velocity in, so let's try 2. 2, maybe I don't mean Y, maybe I mean, in fact, yeah, let's put both of these at 2. So they kind of shoot helps. I'm just going to randomize that a little bit. I just want to scale down this emitter so that it's not so tall, so I have this flat surface. Now let's try it. That's looking more like I had in mind. So I think these are too big. So if I go to my scale, bring down my scale, and bring down randomness, there we go. So I've got like a little cloud of dust, and they kind of disappear after. So now we need to find out where the frame hits. Where the rock hits, sorry. We've made this in completely the wrong place, but that's okay. So let's put it back. Pull it down. So we want our particle system to start at frame, let's say 156. So it starts at 156 and it finishes at 158. And if we play that now, just going to tweak my, maybe I'll just set that back to 0 and see if that looks better. There we go. So we'll set our normal to 5 meters a second. We've got ice. So we'll look at that in our camera view. Maybe they're a bit fine at this view, so let's increase our scale a bit more. Just tweaking to get a size that you're happy with, maybe 0.15. Perfect. Okay, so now we're going to take our mesh and we're going to position it under all of the other blocks. Let's call this particle emitter. We're going to move this to a new group called particle particles. Okay, so we're going to wind through and work out, again, I think if we switch to the top view. So we're going to put under each of our particle systems, each of our blocks, sorry. Okay, so you'll notice the problem is they all fire at the same point. So the fix is to change the trigger point, but the problem is each particle system is an instance rather than its own unique thing. So it's an easy fix. All we need to do is work our way around, and where we have dust cloud selected at the moment, we're going to click the button and it will make a new, just like you would with the material. So we just need to do this for all of these to make sure that they're independent. And now we're just going to wind back and work out where each block needs to hit. So that's the next block. Let's find our particle emitter for that one. So this is this one. So that's going to be 188 and 190. There we go. And that is 259 and 261. Obviously yours will be different. I don't know why I'm reading these numbers to you, because yours will depend entirely on your path and where you've put things. But yeah, this works for me. So 352, 254. And let's just play this back. And one little thing you might want to change is if you click through all of these and just put a random number in each of these seeds, and all that does is it just changes how the particles are spawned and how they react, so that you don't get exactly the same thing every time. It's probably going to be too subtle to notice, but very nice. So now we want to push this object off the scene. So up to the top of the shot. Great. Okay, so there's one last little finishing touch that I want to add, and that is like these kind of dust specks and particles in the air. I think will look nice. So very easy to do. I'm just going to delete that object. That should be there. So kind of similar technique. We're going to go Shift and A, and we're going to make a cube. I'm going to tab into edit mode and bring this down. So I want to make let's just come out of this camera view. So I always want to make it like it's a space that is covering, like a cover for the top of the level. Let's give it a little bit more height. Okay, and we're going to take our particle that we have up here. I'm going to duplicate it, and we're going to call this particle. I can't spell particle. Let's see if it's spelling. Never mind. So we're going to delete that material. We're going to hit new, and then we're going to make a base color, which is an emission. So let's set the strength to 10, and let's set the color to make it soft warm yellow. So we're going to click on this, and we're going to make another particle system. So click on the particles button here, and then click on the plus, and we're going to leave everything as it is to start with. We're going to turn off show emitter in the viewport, and we're going to need to do that in the render as well. And we're going to change our in render. We're going to change render as object, and we're going to use the eyedropper to select that. Okay, so it's already something interesting going on. Let's put some scale randomness in so they're not all the same size. And we're going to set our lifetime to 500, which is the length of the animation. I want to start at 200. In fact, let's make this 700. And the reason for doing that is that if we start it at 0, you'll see them starting to form. And we actually want them to be fully formed at the start of the animation. So I'll set it to minus 200. And now they're fully formed, which is cool, but I don't want them falling like that. So we're going to go to force field. No, we're going to go. I can never find this when I need it. So we're going to go to field weights and we're going to turn the gravity to 0. And now we should have a bunch of objects that float away, which is kind of cool, and not what I'm going for. So what we want to do is go to physics and change this to change our Brownian motion settings. So let's try something like that. So maybe still a bit extreme. Okay, so we've got things flying around. That's looking pretty cool. But we're going to also turn our velocity to 0. We need to restart the animation again. That is moving around more than I would like first. There's a reason it's doing that, and I don't know what the reason is. Hang on. So let's dial up our Brownian more. Let's take it all up to 20. And we're going to set our velocity, normal velocity to 0. And we're also going to set our mass to 20 to slow them down. Let's dial up our drag. There we go, that's more than I have in mind. And we could try increasing the mass even further. So you just need to wind it back to the start to... Cool. Now, this is too many for my taste. I think I would like 100 in the scene. And then if we switch our camera view, you'll see we've got these kind of dust particles floating in the air. It's maybe a little too many, or maybe they're too big, so you can tweak that. We can make the scale even smaller. And we can reduce the number to 50. There we go. That's maybe more. I'm probably a tiny bit too small now. And if we hit the render button to have a look at our scene, see them with the volume effects and the glow effect added. It's going to take a second to pre-process. Nice. Looking really cool. I just noticed a slight problem that might not be an issue for you, but I've got my camera turned off there in the array, so it wasn't showing the proper snake in the render. Nice. If we go back to we've currently got our volume turned off in this scene, but you can see things working a lot better. Getting all the crazy highlights and shadows and God rays and all that nice stuff cutting through. So there's one more thing. I keep saying one more thing, but there's actually two more things. But I'd like to put a little effect on the snake every time it eats a pellet, so you know something's happening. And it's very easy to do. So we're going to go to shading. And we're going to make another material here. So Shift-A search, principled BSDF, and we're going to make this a glowing material. So if we Control-Shift on this, our snake will go white, and we'll go to emission and set the strength to 10, and we'll give it a kind of blue colour, so hologrammy. And I want to use the snake skin template to act as like a mesh, like a guide. Sorry. I want to use the snakeskin material to act as a mask. So if we might need to make another colour up. Let's see how this one looks. I think I'm going to make yet another color ramp. So color ramp. And we're going to select both of these, and I'm just going to pull this over so it's pretty uniform. So, and then if we plug this into our strength and then preview it, I think I want the inverse of that. So let's swap these over. And you should get something like that. And then I don't want there to be a color at all. I want it to be see-through. So I think I can then hook this into the alpha. Yeah, there we go. So we've got like a wireframe of the snake. And what I then want to do is be able to mix between these two. So let's bump the strength up. So the strength, the problem we've got the strength at the moment is it's now set to 1, which is the most that that color can be, the white. So if we're going to add in a math node, and add it in there, and then we set that to multiply, and then set the value here to 20, we get much more of a glow, much better. And then we're going to make a mix shader. And we're going to connect the two up. So now if the factor is at 0, we get the snake like that. And if the factor is at 1, we get the snake skin. So we can mix between the two. And we're just going to keyframe that part. So I'm going to... Oh, I made a terrible mistake here. Oh dear. So I just lost Charlie's back up again. Please ignore this. I've created some absolute disaster here. I'm going to leave this in the video. This is the worst. I hate this part of Blender. I don't actually know how to... So we're going to join that area. And then we're going to... join that area, I guess. Oh, this will do for fixing this. So we're going to pull up another... So creating another window here. Okay, so with this selected, we've got our snake middle action, which we can expand out, and that will show us every time we hit a palette. But we need to be able to see this mix shader, so we're just going to right click and choose insert keyframe, and now we should have it added into our array graph. So before it eats the palette, it wants to be set to 1, and then as it eats it, we're going to set that value to 0. And then right click and insert keyframes. And then I want it to fade out, so maybe like here. And then we'll set it to 1. And here, to insert the keyframe, so we should get a little holes. And maybe you want to stretch that. Maybe you don't want it to happen instantly. Okay. Let's just see if I can move that keyframe. There we go. So I'm just going to drag this over a couple of frames. Nice. So now we just need to select these, hit Control and C, and then every time the count increases, we can just drop. Just make sure I've got a snake. This. Cool. So we're going to select just these. This is going to be a little bit tricky. Hit Control and C, and then we can drag it to the next section. Rather than to remake the animation each time. So we're just using Control and V to paste them in. And this should be the last one, I think. Oh, we've got another one here. Perfect. Okay, so very, very last thing that I want to add in is I want to add a transition at the start and end where everything kind of falls apart, because I think it looks cool. So we're going to use the randomize proportional edit to do that. It's nice and easy to do. All we need to do is make sure that our camera is not selectable. So we want to choose the empty that we have controlling the camera and turn that off. Okay, and also let's make sure that our camera is set to not be selectable. So that should be the camera, the empty, and the cube all turned off. And we're going to put our mouse playback head here, and then hit the A key, and then we're going to use K to create a new keyframe key set, and we're going to choose location and rotation. And then we're going to wind on to say 480, and we're going to do the same thing. And then we're going to go all the way to the end, and using our randomized proportional edit, we're going to select a cube in somewhere in the center, hit G, hit Z, and then pull it up. And you might want to increase the size of your fall off radius using your mouse wheel. So I'm going to keep increasing it till I get something like that. And then I'm also going to hit the full stop key and make sure I've got individual origins selected. And I'm going to hit R twice, and I'm going to rotate these blocks so everything's kind of run. And then we're going to hit K again and choose location and rotation. And if I pull the mouse back, and I'm going to hit A to select all, and hit K and choose location and rotation. And if I pull the mouse back, you'll see the whole scene reassembles in this cool way. And all we need to do is then select, with everything still selected, hit Control and C, move back to 0 and hit Control and V whilst hovering over the timeline. Nope. So everything's still selected. I'm going to hit Control C, and I'm going to move our mouse to frame 1, and then hit Control V. Make sure you're hovering over the timeline. And it should then reassemble the scene. So we've now got like a perfect loop. Let's get to the end, and then it seems great to put itself back together again and restarts. So to finish this off, so you can just preview it nicely, if we select our camera, go to viewport display, and we might need to make this selectable again. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong camera. Camera down here, viewport display, and change this passepartout to there, and turn off our grid. And we should be able to preview the animation, see everything flying in and out. And there we go, one finished sequence. So all that's left to do now is do a quick render image, see that everything's looking right. Nice. And then we can do render animation and export the whole thing. And let's sit back and enjoy what has been a long process, but hopefully you've learned a lot from it. So there you go, final animation complete. Loads of cool stuff going on, perfect little seamless loop. Hopefully you learned some cool tricks and tips and ideas for your next project. There's loads we could do with this, loads of polish I'd like to add, but like I said, I don't want this to be a 19-hour long video. And I just wanted to kind of cover how, you can start with a simple idea of messing about with arrays and it develop into this whole project. And I think what I'd like to do is go in and try and import this into Unreal and see if I can build the actual interactive game. So that might be a topic for a future video. In the meantime, thanks for all your support. Please subscribe if you're not already. Leave a comment, leave a thumbs up. anything that shows your support for the channel is greatly appreciated. And come hang out in the Discord. We're a small group at the moment, but I'd love to give advice and help as many of you as I can. Until the next one.